Good afternoon. I'm Bishop Ronald Shelton. I'm very honored today to have Bishop John Dillard with us, who is the bishop for the province of St. Brendan. The Apostolic Celtic Church, when I refer to the church, I refer to the group. We are a daughter church of Bishop Dillard and the province of St. Brendan, and therefore we are a granddaughter church of the Church of Scotland through Bishop Stalker, Bishop Gillies, and many others. And so it's an honor to have Bishop Dillard with us today, and I wanted him to talk about what made him research the Celtic Church, what brought him in, and give a little bit of just the history of himself and how he brought the faith back to America and founded the province of St. Brendan. Bishop Dillard, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here. Where to start? I was an Episcopalian going to an Episcopal church, and you know, when I think about the church with its pipe organ and its Anglican liturgy, it seemed ancient to me. It went back to the 1500s. That was a long time for me. And I accepted that. Along the way, I began reading some of the early church fathers. I got off on the wrong foot. I read Augustine of Hippo's works without knowing who he was. And I'll leave it at that. He's not if you read him, you'll want to stop reading. But I began reading mostly like Ignatius's letters, for example, and just became enthralled in what the early church, and I became curious. What was the early church? What was it like? Why we have Protestants that worship this way, and the Orthodox who wear black, and the Romans and Anglicans who wear white, and why the Anglicans are the way they are, the Lutherans, and how do we get to be so different if we're supposed to have the same message? And so I began a quest of looking at what the early church was like and reading the early church fathers. And along the way, I came across something that told me about an early church in Britain. And that was long before the Anglicans formed in 1500. And so I began trying to read everything I get my hands on. And in doing that, what I discovered was there are plenty of so-called Celtic groups out there, but they fall into three categories. They're basically Orthodox, they're Roman, they're Anglican in beliefs, with a little Celtic music, a little kindle our lamps thrown in to make it be, but they weren't Celtic. And I kept thinking, was this what the church was like? And I'd read and I finally began getting little bits and pieces of it, and reading about someone called Saint Moria, and this concept about original sin being a hoax and so forth. And I even went and talked to my priest in the Episcopal church and asked him what he knew about the Celtic. I said, did you guys study that in seminary school? Because this was like a forerunner of what you had. He said, yeah, we did, but I don't know. All the way started with me. He just kind of brushed me off. And so I said to him, I said, I wish the Celtic church was still around, because everything I'm reading is just resonating with me. This concept of finding the kingdom of God within yourself, which is what Jesus said in Luke and the Gospel of Thomas, and letting your light shine forth, and the things I was reading. And so I just happened to stumble across an article written by, before that, I'd found a group up in Wisconsin, Minnesota, something, and contacted them, and they were Orthodox. I found another group over in Missouri, I guess, called Celtic Synod, and they never wrote me back. Had a website, and didn't get discouraged. Came across a writing I found, an article published, because you keep digging around Google, and one website leads to another one. It wasn't directly in Google, it was just going off a link off some website. So I found something written by a Bishop Stalker in Scotland. So I wrote him. Well, the folks here won't cooperate with me. I'll just write somebody overseas. And he took a while to write back, and frankly, they were kind of suspicious. What's an American doing writing this? And so we had this back and forth, and then he handed me off to John Gillies, who would kind of become my mentor. And we wrote and talked, and they got comfortable with me, suspicions. And I went through the enrollment process and had to get a background check and a police report, which is kind of embarrassing, because I'm an attorney, and you try to tell them that, and say, well, we don't know about that. If I have a criminal record, they'll take my law license. You got to get a police background check. So I went through the whole discernment process and all that. And went through seminary. And part of it was distance learning. and they would give me studies to do and papers to write. And Dr. McNally, who was, David McNally, who was head of their seminary program, told me that I had gone through the material quicker than anybody he'd ever seen. Not bragging on myself, but I mean, I've done quite a bit of graduate work and research work, and it wasn't that hard, frankly, to do this. And so the reason I'm saying that is they began to want to give me more on that, and led to my going to Scotland and being trained. And
What year was that when you first came?
the early 2000s. And by 2004, they were going to ordain me a deacon. And they put me on a fast track because somewhere in the light bulb went off, we want to get a mission here in America. And I went over for training after study, and I've told your bishop many, many colorful stories. I won't put it on camera, but they're a colorful group over there. Trained in essentially a barn. I was ordained in a horse stable that had been converted to an oratory, a small little church, St. Ninian's, and ordained to the priesthood in a Celtic church, the Mither Kirk, which goes way, way back. Stone, beautiful, most powerful presence of God I've ever felt in any house of worship. I felt there, ancient. Big, thick wooden doors, had the old big key you put in like you see on TV Castle. That lifted a big wooden, slat in the back, kind of crude. No electricity, no heat. They had gas heaters in it, kerosene lamps, or gas lamps. It was beautiful. And when they sang a cappella of the hymns, it make you want to cry. The acoustics were perfect. My service was special, being ordained in a humble converted horse stable, because it reminds you of the humble beginnings of Christ, being born in a stable. But being ordained to the priesthood and the obligation that's put upon you in an ancient Celtic church was just simply overpowering. And I remember the dinner before ordination. We had all the clergy come in from everywhere. They came in from all over the place. I was kind of he was an American. We're going to ordain an American. I'd seen pictures from other ordinations, and there weren't that many people there, but they all came in for, go see what this is about. And we were in Bishop Gillies' house for dinner before my ordination. And I remember Bishop Stalker, who was the head of the Celtic Church, looking around and counting, 12 clergy. And he said, I'm reminded of Jesus' gathering the Last Supper when the 12 apostles gathered. And I always remember that, just the solemnity of that, and us, the quietness that filled the room, because this is a boisterous group. It just overcame us as we thought about that. And because in a sense, with the charge they give you in Scotland, of the burden that you're taking, the yoke you're taking upon, it's a different kind of sacrifice. It was a sacrifice, but a different kind, a sacrifice of life. And anyway, in my conversations with them about trying to find the Celtic Church, and of course you don't ask them, are you the true Celtic Church? You don't ask them such a thing as that. But I asked Bishop Stalker when they were sitting in a rocking chair, I remember, and just talking, because he wanted to get to know me better. And I asked him about his background. He'd been a bishop in one of the old Catholic churches, along with another bishop in the Celtic Church that left. And he told me a story about having met this old bishop from the Highlands in 1978. And that bishop told him a story. He said 3 Roman Catholic priests in 1946, a year after the war ended, were disenchanted with where the Roman Church was going at that time. And they'd heard about the old Celtic Church surviving up in the Highlands of Scotland. Now at that time, in fact, up until the mid-1970s, I'd say early 70s, it was virtually impassable to get to the Highlands of Scotland. The roads were just wagon trails. And if you went in there, it took you forever to go in there. And you might come walking out because your car might get broke down, or the bottom torn out the rock or something. But these guys walked in there, went all the way up in the Highlands, and they stayed for a number of years. I think they came out in 48 or 49. And they wanted to find what they thought was a true church, that church that came out of Jerusalem. The church in Jerusalem is still around, but it's changed so much with all the things that have gotten in the Orthodox Church. And they had heard about this church that was way up there, still around, in people's homes. Andrew Carmichael had written about it, several others over the years had written about it. And they wanted to find that church. And what I'm told, the people of the Highlands they aren't very friendly, very welcoming. But somehow these Roman Catholic priests convinced the people that they were the real thing. And they wanted to learn the old ways. And the people took them in and taught them, ordained them. And when they came out of the Highlands, they tried to establish the Celtic Church in Scotland. Didn't do very well. I know very well how that goes. And I think Bishop Ron does too. We're all just set in our ways too much. We're brought up in some church, whether it be a Baptist, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Roman, in my case, Episcopalian. We're all taught up in that. In fact, I remember getting a comment back in one of my papers, because they pass them, Dr. McDowell, he'd pass them around to the other people, let them read them. Bishop Gillies, my mentor, wrote, "Well, I can see your Anglican roots coming out." I thought, what's he mean by that? I still know what he meant. But to him it showed. And we have all this ingrained in us, whether we realize it or not. I know for the longest time, I thought in Anglican terms. They'd ask me how many sacraments there were. I'd say, well, there's 2 big ones and 5 small ones. That's what's taught in the 39 Articles if you're an Episcopalian or Anglican, right? I know better now. That's Roman base. 7 big Roman ones. The Anglicans broke it up. And so it's things like that. Real presence in the communion. Transubstantiation. We have all these things that block us. And now, the Episcopalian way seems strange to me. I'm just so ingrained in the Celtic, it makes sense to me. And I think that's what was pulling me, was that I realized that something here is, it's not made up. Why do we baptize babies, for example? It's not in the Bible. And those that baptize babies say, well, there's that passage that says they baptized everybody in the household. Got to be some babies in there somewhere. No, if you know anything about Roman culture and Jewish culture, household didn't include children, because children couldn't work. They were sort of a burden. Household included servants. It meant they baptized the adults and their servants. You see, there's no basis for baptizing babies. Because if you look at what Peter did in Acts 2:38, and he asked people before he baptized them, and he says, and they believed and were baptized. And you find that all throughout Acts, they believed and they were baptized. Professing Christ, believing in Christ, was an important prerequisite to being baptized. A baby can't do that. So, looking back on this, the whole Celtic Church just seems logical to me now. It seems like home. It's a fit. I understand it. But back then, I still thought in terms of the Anglican Episcopal terms. Well, I think that's what these priests ran into. They were in Scotland. Scotland's very Presbyterian, very Calvinist. There's some Anglicans there. They don't do very well. In fact, there they have the official government churches, and everybody else just kind of suffers, is what I understood. The other churches kind of get subsidized. And if you're not an official church, you just kind of suffer. Just do as you can. And that's if you can get registered as a charity. That was one of the big things they worried with, was getting that charitable registration. But these priests over there suffered. And finally, they just beat their heads against the wall trying to convert these Calvinists. They just gave up on it. And 2 of them died. And so in 1978, Bishop Stalker met this old guy. He told him his story about going to the Highlands and finding what he thought was a true church. And he says, and I guess it's just going to die with me. And Bishop Stalker said, no, it won't. He said, teach me what you have. And so he spent a lot of time with that old priest or bishop learning the ways of the Celtic Church. And it's how we teach. We teach orally. We pass it down. If you read Caesar's writings, he was amazed at how these Celts and Druids could just, this family history and all this stuff back orally. And that's how they always say, don't, you can't write it down. I was told when I was going through the program, you can't write this down. You got to learn it orally. You got to pass it down orally. And I've come to understand what that old priest was talking about, because as hard as I tried to get something established here, I ran into a roadblock after roadblock. Now, Bishop Ron says we have a child here, and I've taught him a lot. I thought that in my time, when it's time for me to go, I thought, well, it's just all going to go with me because nobody cares anymore. That the church that I studied with is fractured and scattered over in Scotland. But your bishop has taught me into writing it all down. And it's going to be a massive encyclopedia. I'm in the process of doing that. And when I do, I'm going to print it. He can't read my handwriting. Nobody can. Bishop Ron gets it. Because he's like a brother to me. I wouldn't trust this stuff with anybody but him. So you got to outlive me. You're younger than I am. Well, at least it'll be written down. You can pass it on to
I don't know,
others.
I'm right behind you.
But anyway, I think I've rambled, but I went in search of what I found was the true church. And I call it the true church because it's simple. We don't make stuff up. When you look at this doctrine of original sin, when you look at the doctrine of transubstantiation, you have to work really hard to make that stuff stick. When you look at supporting infant baptism, you got to work hard to make it stick. When you look at praying to dead people and try to get around idolatry and the graven image thing in the Ten Commandments, you got to really work hard to make all that stick. We don't do that in the Celtic Church. We don't do that. Ours is simple. Our belief is basically primarily based on the Gospels, what Jesus taught. And if you don't remember anything else, just remember these four things. Remember what the Celtic Church is built upon the foundation: love, humility, compassion, forgiveness. Is there anything else you need to know? The sum of those four things is golden rule. Each of those four things is exactly how Jesus told us to live our lives. If he told us about it, we experienced it. At the mandamus, which we incorporate in our baptism, the washing of the feet, Jesus told his disciples at the Last Supper to love one another as he had loved us. He showed compassion time and time again. The Samaritan woman at the Samaritan well, telling the story of the Samaritan on the road, didn't he? What about forgiveness? His words on the cross: forgive them, for they don't know what they do. Humility, born in a manger, born in a stockyard, lived his whole life, humble beginnings, no income, nobody to take care of him, going from town to town, just teaching people, healing the sick, and telling people, love one another. All four things. So, ours is a simple faith. Very simple. And maybe that's what scares people about it. They need all this doctrine. They need all these catechisms they've got to memorize and repeat. There's a church that I know someone belongs to. They proof text. They take a sentence here, and a sentence here, and a sentence here. They put them all together. See? It supports this doctrine. And I said, no, it don't. This is Old Testament. This is New Testament. They're written with different people at different time periods to different audiences. You can't combine them. But in doing so, it gives them the doctrine they need to tell their people. Well, we don't do that. We don't do that. When people ask me, what Bible do you recommend? I said, the one you'll read. I don't care if it's a New Living Translation. I don't care if it's NIV, Good News, King James, you understand it. If you'll read it, that's the one for you. Ours is simple. Read it. Meditate on it. And all you need to remember, if anything else, is the four pillars that form the foundation.